Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's program will be recorded beginning in 3, 2, 1. And now our moderator, Katherine Quinn.
Hello, members and guests. Thank you for zooming in to tonight's program, Inspiration to Creation, the final of 4 online events celebrating the organization's 40th year, as well as Italian Heritage Month. My name is Katherine Quinn, and I'm honored to welcome you all into my home tonight and to be moderating on behalf of the National Organization of Italian Women's Rhode Island region. I hope you enjoyed the mini video tour of our home. Sorry it was in silence. And some of the artwork created by my late husband, actor and artist, Anthony Quinn. As founder and president of the Anthony Quinn Foundation, I'm excited to discuss tonight how heritage and ancestral legacy has inspired our 2 featured speakers, designer Nicole Romano and award-winning artist Jeanne Cardarelli Raimondi. In our mission to champion the important role the arts play in our everyday lives, the Anthony Quinn Foundation understands the significance of one's heritage as an inevitable artistic influence that inspires, empowers, and connects us all. My husband had a wonderful quote about the arts that I love to share. Art is that without which one can exist, but without which there's no reason for existing. The work of artists surround us everywhere, sometimes in very obvious ways, but more often than not, the work of artists surrounds us and touches us in subtle ways every day. We just don't always notice. Well, tonight we are taking notice. Now let me introduce Nicole and Jeanne, our 2 strong Italian American women creatives. After graduating from Rhode Island School of Design, where she earned a BA in apparel design, Nicole Romano forged ahead by launching her very own multi-dimensional brand. Worn by young Hollywood and titans of the fashion world and featured in fashion magazines and shows like Sex and the City, you can find her designs right here in Rhode Island at Barrington Books, online at Revolve and NicoleRomano.com, and in stores everywhere. In 2013, Nicole was presented with the NOIAW's annual Wise Woman Award to acknowledge her success as a jewelry designer and her dedication to manufacturing in her home state of Rhode Island. Jeanne Cardarelli Raimondi is an award-winning artist and lifetime student of art. Her favorite medium is oil painting, but she also works in watercolors and mixed media. Jeanne's style is impressionist and abstract. She holds a Bachelor of Science from Rhode Island College, where she studied fine art and also commercial art. Jeanne's work is also featured on NOIAW's note card set, featuring 12 Italian American women artists as part of the most recent membership campaign. Jeanne will speak to us now about how her Italian heritage has influenced her artwork's content and style, and how her painting is an extension of her family's legacy, blurring the lines of artisan work and fine art. Nicole will then follow Jeanne's and share some of her stunning creations and their inspiration with all of us. We'll conclude with a Q&A, so please be sure to drop your questions for Jeanne and Nicole using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Okay, Jeanne, take it away.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here and to share with you the influences that provide the inspiration to my artwork. As Kathy mentioned, my Italian heritage and family legacy has played an important role and the content of my work. I come from a long line of makers and craftsmen. Both my mother and father's families were fine artisans. They possessed many artistic talents, from delicate needlework to creative stonemasonry, woodworking, and wood crafting. As with many Italian families, working with their hands and creating across the various mediums was a large part of their lives and passed down through the generations, to the point where I believe it is part of our lifeblood and our DNA. Our lives echoed that genetic implanting, embracing the arts and our continued dedication towards making and creating across the various mediums. I mentioned that there were artisans on both sides of my family. And of course, my maternal grandfather, Antonio Lambreza, who was born in 1891 in a small village called Ossata di Puglia. He had promise, and he served as an apprentice at 9 years old for a coffin maker, where he learned many skills, which took him to the United States as a teenager and found work as a carpenter, and later became a builder and a contractor, building his own homes and building other homes. He was multi-talented and skilled. And of course, he was an excellent winemaker. He created and designed everything that was necessary to maintain a desirable lifestyle in America. So he married my grandmother in the United States in 1913. Her name was Rose Coppola, and she was born in Avellino in 1889. And she began as a young girl learning needlework. She learned to crochet and to knit. And as customary, as all young Italian girls in their teens, they began to prepare for their trousseau. She was creating fine needlework and tatting. And I have an example of it, actually. She tatted linens and tablecloths and clothing and ensembles. I don't know if you can see it, but this is part of a sheet that was, really needed to be disposed of. But my mother and my grandmother took apart the top of the sheet. It was enormous. It was probably 90 inches wide. So I had that and another one made into valances on a cornice. But if you could see it closely, the workmanship is unbelievable. There's French knots and fine cut work and needlework and of course the tatting. So that was part of my grandmother's tutorial as a young girl. But she really was a gifted seamstress and pattern maker. And of course, married to my grandfather, cooking and entertaining was her art. So together, my grandparents had a great appreciation of opera, Italian music. And I can remember them sitting in the living room with the French doors closed, listening to the old Victrola, which played 78 sized records and recordings of Italian opera and music. And the children thus were very familiar with the music and the opera. And my mother always told me that she and her siblings sat around and sang around the old pianola. And of course, my mother's sisters and her brothers followed in tradition, the girls learning to knit and crochet and do fine needlework, along with pattern making and sewing. And of course, my uncles, her brothers, followed in the tradition of carpentry. And they too became carpenters and builders, and they built their own homes. So my paternal great-grandfather and grandmother, Rosaria and Gaetano Cardarelli, came to the United States by way of Marseille, France, because Gaetano and his brothers were really talented artisans and stone makers, stone workers. They lived in France and, were working on building bridges all through France and Paris, I'm assuming. So they continued their craft in Rhode Island, and they progressed to own their own stone quarry, which was a big thing for them. So I want to talk about the first time I visited the homeland of my ancestors. I was overcome with emotion and pride of the beauty that was around me, the landscape, the architecture, the antiquity really inspired my creativity. I felt the need to capture the surrounding landscapes onto a canvas. Yes, the sculptures, the churches, the cathedrals, the wonderful, magnificent art museums. I could go on and on talking about the Greco-Roman architecture that still exists in Italy. However, there are so many more small but equally creative examples of that. For instance, visiting my cousins and my family in the small village of Scopoli, where I had the opportunity to pick olives 2 years ago. We were walking along and this little side street of cobblestones that really beckoned me. The cobblestones were so uniquely and intricately placed and the most magnificent design. As I followed along that path, it entered into a cul-de-sac that was so beautiful. I felt that it should really be in a grand piazza somewhere, not just on this little side street, but everybody really did enjoy it there. And certainly I did. I think it was part of the call for me to create more art. And then I was in this medieval village called Castel San Vincenzo, where they're known for their beautiful stone walls and elegant doorways. And it was so picturesque and lovely. In fact, we visited and we were going to a little store where my cousins and I were buying some gifts in a shop. But I paused long enough to watch this elderly gentleman pass through a stone archway of an ancient wall. Well, the lighting was perfect. His figure was beautifully illuminated. And that became the inspiration for one of my sweetest and dearest paintings. And it's just so small. I don't know if you can see it, but it is just the sweetest little painting that I probably would never part with it. But those are just small little instances where there's beauty all over. So yes, I am a lifelong student of art. I started with pottery, and of course as a child, drawing and painting typically. But in high school, I started with pottery and painting, and then I verged into Nantucket basketry. And I painted with oils and watercolor and acrylic and water media, collage, pastels. I utilize various types of media throughout my life. And I feel when I try a new technique or a style, it breathes new life into me. And in my work, it benefits me. For example, I just took a workshop in the Japanese style of printmaking. And that greatly inspired me. So I have a lot of steps in my journey, and they led me to this present time. And it allows me to create much more artwork. And I think it's the inspiration that my grandparents gave me to this artistic exploration. And there are many elements in my paintings that have inspired this passage. Clearly, the incorporation of paths have very much been symbolic of my journey. And then just a little, it was in Pompeii, and I just did a quick little watercolor sketch, but it's sweet. And where else are you going to see this but in Italy, in Pompeii? And I loved it. And then I created something else when I came home. And this is a painting that clearly you can see the path and the journey that I took. And that path leads me into something that I just want to experiment with, and I want to create more. So there are elements into my paintings that inspire this passage. So my style has been transformed from realistic, like a painting in the street of Italy, and it's pretty realistic, but it went from realistic to landscapes, and then working on plein air. And then I moved from impressionism to abstraction. And actually abstraction is my favorite right now. So I've spent several years making Nantucket baskets. And I'm sure my father and grandfathers will be swelling with pride to know that I had to measure and cut and calculate the exact number of staves to create a basket, a purse, a tray, a table, a lamp. And yeah, I did create a table. I have a Nantucket tray table. That was a big endeavor, but I did make one. And so I'm sure that I have to thank my father and grandfathers for giving me the skill set and the instruction to measure once, twice, 3 times, and just cut once. So thank you, Dad. Thank you, Grandpa, for the instruction. I really appreciate that. But actually, I really would like to share a painting that I feel typifies more of an indirect influence on my heritage. And it's a painting I created that I called The Gathering. While I did not have a vision of this painting or the finished work, it just kind of happened. I'm going to get this for you and show you. The images just developed. And can you see it? I hope you can. So these figures symbolize, let's see, can I do that? They symbolize strength, support, and self-empowerment of women. I believe the bond of womanhood provides us and one another as our mothers and grandmothers did before us. And most of us were raised by strong, empowered women. I believe that's part of our heritage. So this painting is very near and dear to me because it has a lot of meaning of our women and being strong and supporting each other. But I'm going to put this down. So this is made with, painting is made with handmade papers and water media and mixed media. So it was a surprise how the images just appeared. And I really loved that. It was very meaningful for me. But at any rate, as time passed, I found I had more and more time to create and make more art. And I guess over the past 20 odd years, I have been devoted to my craft. And of course, I recently retired, and that has given me the opportunity to travel more and to paint in different countries and different landscapes. I was in San Miguel, Mexico a year ago, April, where I was afforded the ability to paint with 4 of my artist friends. And my work really did evolve, and it was all in plein air. But again, I was fortunate enough to have that ability or the opportunity. So I have been an artist my whole life. And actually, I have been very fortunate to have studied and mentored by many successful and talented artists. And I do have the utmost admiration for them. However, I'm greatly appreciative of my cultural heritage and the influence of my Italian ancestry They really are the building blocks that inspire and continue to foster my creativity. And the fact that I can do it. I can hear my grandmother telling me that. But anyway, thank you so much for allowing me to share what I feel inspires me most about my heritage and being an Italian American woman. And I think now maybe Nicole can do that. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Nicole Romano. I'm going to pick up from here with my medium, which is jewelry. And I started with fashion, my company, but even before then, as a little girl, playing around and poking around in my house, I found my father's sketchbook. And when I found the sketchbook, I just remember turning the pages, and it was tucked away on the side of his wardrobe in the sweaters. It was just something that he did for himself. And I found it, I was 6 years old, 7 years old. And I found it, and I have it here today to give you a little glimpse into what I saw as a little girl and what I feel sort of sparked my artistic ability. This was his sketchbook, and a lot of it is in marker or watercolors. There are scenes from all over the world, whether it was Monte Carlo or African safari, or a man and woman sitting in Newport, or a derby. But I remember flipping through this actual book as a little girl and just saying to myself, these are so beautiful. They're colorful. And they just spoke to me, and they were very abstract and emotional, and there was a lot of feeling in them. And actually, I have this hanging in my apartment in New York. It's a series of men that he just drew in black ink. Rocky Graziano. I found them all so beautiful. And in the back of the book, I actually thought I was doing something in my mind at that point that was so similar to his artwork. I was just trying to replicate it. So, I mean, this was one of my renditions as a little girl in the back of his sketchbook. And I don't think he ever saw this until, down the road. But, at this point, I was just realizing what this spoke to me in some way. And, I didn't know what it meant, but I just kept going with it. And never really fine-tuned my craft until I got a little bit older. But as far as my family and my ancestors, my father and my father's sister, my aunt, grew up expressing themselves artistically. My father went on to do some paintings, again, just as something he enjoyed once in a while, but it was not his career per se, but he was a way of expressing himself through that. And my aunt was, and still is, an artist, traveled a great deal around the world, and is to this day actively creating all kinds of art. My mother's side, my ancestors on my mother's side worked in the jewelry industry, and they all were involved in jewelry or textiles in some way, shape, or form. And I always knew this growing up, and I always knew our traditions and knew these bits of information about my family. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older did they start making more sense to me and mesh together to speak to me on what it all means and how it's all connected. I traveled to Italy in college. That was my first trip. And I really, truly believe at that moment, the impact of going to the country for the first time was different than just anyone going. I felt a really, really bizarre, deep, indescribable connection to what I was seeing. And it wasn't as specific as a city or a place. It was just, sometimes it wasn't even, I couldn't even describe how it influenced me and inspired me. And so then I went to Rhode Island School of Design, fine-tuned my craft into fashion, and therefore started doing diving more into fashion as my way of expressing myself. But I really started understanding these traditions, and my grandmother on my father's side was an embroiderer. And then my grandmother on my mother's side involved in the jewelry industry and textiles, and my aunts in textiles. And all of this really had to mean something. And then I really started seeing it take shape. And some of the very first pieces that I designed, and architecture was always something that I just really was so drawn to. So this way stones were stacked, for example, I started just recognizing it after the fact of how certain stones were stacked and creating shapes within that. And I started seeing it in my work. Again, not really realizing at the moment when I was making these pieces or sketching them or playing around with the stones that this is where this came from. But here's another example of earrings that these were available. These Bergdorf Goodman in New York carried these, but this is another example of these stacks of stones that I really, really loved. And it's become a signature thing in my collection, the treatment of stones and chains. It all seems a little architectural, and then the colors. And I think of my father's drawings and sketches. And when I look at my own sketchbook, I see my father. I see my father's hand in there. And this is just an example of just a very rough first conceptual sketch. And actually, Kathy is wearing the necklace that is.
Yes, I am, and I love it, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you for doing that for the foundation. We're so proud.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. It looks beautiful on you. So this is how it was born. You know, this was one of the details, the geometric work of a stone or a shape, and the facets, something that I really, I see reoccurring. And again, as I was speaking about my grandparents and their hands in fashion and textile and jewelry making, and then that combined with architecture, I started also noticing the treatment of the metals and the stones. It's very unconventional as far as jewelry is made or designed, and it sort of has. I started noticing this textile way I was handling the metal and the chain, and as if it was thread or silk. And here are some cuffs, and you can see how this mesh chain is woven through these. It's almost like metal lace. And another detail that is constant in my collection is this very fine wrapped chain. And then you can also see this piece as well. It's a little bit more of a simple variation of that concept, but these things I all believe are part of my fabric, part of the things that I have molded me the way that they are, the way that I am, and the colors and the textures that I've learned. Travel has been a really huge part of my inspiration in fashion. And another element that's signature to my work is sort of this mashup of elements. And it could be multiple chains and stones and colors and metals. And you could see some examples here where it's clusters of chain, colors, and shapes. And they're all, although contrasting, they're in a way in perfect harmony. in my world. And some of the textures, you know, one of the sources of inspiration for my work was the Piedmont Mountains. And it was a very rocky, rustic, dark colored, kind of Gothic inspiration. So I worked a lot on textures. And because of that exploration of textures, I developed a collection of paperweights that I'm going to actually launch very soon. So I will show you those. And these are all metal. They're actually similar to the geometric shape of Kathy's necklace, but we reworked them with very deep grooves, and each line is hand engraved. So every paperweight has its own shape, and they're, you know, so it's an example of how one concept, there's really just no end to it. It can just keep going and going and going. And that's what I love about being an artist, is there's no cap on what we can create and where the story starts and ends, especially, you know, when we feel so passionate about it, and especially when it's rooted in something so deep and significant as our heritage and where our ancestors came from, and what our parents and their parents were passionate about, what inspired them. To this day, I see how my father is inspired, and although he may not have the sketchbook that he had in his younger years, but just simply, and I'll show you an example of just the things he has in his home or his bedroom, an octopus, or an octopus ceramic piece, or a box, or something that is Sicilian inspired, or I see him expressing himself in all elements of life. And that, to this day, shows me it's a never ending, beautiful gift that I feel I have, that I'm so grateful for, that I won't ever stop. And I'm lucky enough to have it as my business. So thank you all so much for listening and allowing me to share this story with you. And I think let's have some questions.
Thanks, Nicole. Oh my gosh. You know what I find so interesting about you both? Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Jeannie. You know, I think it's really interesting how you both have, and this is what I think a true artist is. You know, you learn from your heritage, your parents, your ancestry, but then with your influences of what your life represents, you've turned it into your own personal expression. And so, Nicole, you know, through your dad's drawings and sketches and paintings in life, and your Italian heritage, and you've turned it into your own. That's what art is. It's an expression of your own personal experience. And Jeanne, you take your ancestry and you carry it forward, but you're living in a 21st century world now. And, you know, there's so much more stimulation around us, and you've incorporated that into some of and you see your newer paintings, how they just get, you know, they're full of all these influences, but you can't let go of that. It's a connection to the past that's a common thread, you know, through all of the arts. And it's beautiful. It's derivative. It's constantly evolving. And I see that in young artists that I meet every day. So congratulations to you both for just being true to your own selves and creating, you know, something that's original, but connected to your past. Now I'm gonna read to you. I'll give you one each at a time, some of the questions that have come in. So I'm going to start with you, Jeanne, because you haven't spoken for a few minutes. Are you hopeful about the future of Italian American women in art, and are we becoming more visible as artists?
Well, yes, I think we are becoming more visible as artists. I think there are many women artists who have Italian heritage. I mean, how could it not be? It's our lifeblood. It's embedded in our DNA. And if you just look at any art magazine or art book or any museum, there's so much of Italian art. I mean, Italian and art is one and the same. It is part of our DNA. And I think we are becoming more visible. And,
I think so too.
and yeah, I do.
Thank you. And Nicole, for you, somebody asked, how long does it take you to make a piece of jewelry? It's incredible what the work that must, but it's like a painting too. It's very detailed and so.
Well, it definitely, it varies per piece. Sometimes this piece, for example, just one of these, this is one of my absolute favorite pieces. And I think because it actually took so long to create. What these little bars were designed to fit this chain exactly, but allow it to have a little movement. So to make this very first piece when we were still figuring it out, probably took about 2 weeks. And that was when we were first creating. I was trying to figure out how these little bars would work. And, you know, I also wanted the back to be as beautiful as well. So it has to be, it's like almost like engineering a necklace.
Well,
like,
with jewelry also, don't you have the problem of you have to put it on your neck and it has to be comfortable. You can't just, take a piece of art and throw it on your neck. And
exactly. It has to be worn as well. But, you know, it's one of the things I love about jewelry. And, you know, I had a fashion line as well, and was doing women's wear and clothing, that with jewelry, you can, yes, it does have to fit and be comfortable, but you have so much more leeway to go over the top and be like a little more bold, and the fit is okay. You know, I have to go around my neck, but that's about it, you know?
yeah.
So, I mean, this chain, there's so many elements to the one piece. And then it was like, you know, these stones are actually vintage. So, you know, every piece I feel like is a story, and I could talk you through each piece, because it's not just like, here's a necklace. It's like, wait, these stones are actually from the 60s. And I fell in love with this chain because of the fluidity of the movement. And then these things were created around it. And again, it's about the story. And so, yeah, it varies, but each piece, every little element is completely thought out. So that does take a good amount of time. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's incredible. I have a question for you both from Eileen. And so, Jeanne, I'll let you answer first. Have either of you as artists found yourself creating art or design in response to our current circumstances, the pandemic?
Oh, yes. I believe that part of the note card from National Organization for Italian American Women, I did submit a painting that was specific to the pandemic. And I have created several paintings because of the pandemic and being close to home and being in my own studio. Yeah, I did. There was a lot. In fact, this painting behind me is part of another one I created because of the pandemic. And of course, yes, there's going to be a path, because almost all of them have a path. And that's sort of my spiritual and symbolic journey. It kind of looks like bars, and they're closed. I feel like I was, in the home and in my studio, and I did create this because of that. And you can see some webbing where I feel like I'm looking outdoors from inside, and the trees are in back. And I really feel like this was a path that I was taking, but I wasn't going anywhere with that path because it was pandemic and I was in quarantine. This painting also has what I call the sister, and that too is very similar, with a path. And if you can see it, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, well, this painting is also something to do with quarantine. I felt like I was being sequestered to my studio, and I felt like you can see some gates and stonework. I felt like I was almost almost a prisoner, and I needed to get more of the outside in. And this was all quarantine, but there's painting that I did, and it is very poignant, and it's kind of important work, I think, for most artists during the quarantine, of being shut in. And it's going to be in the note card. It is very abstract, as these two are abstract. But yeah, I think that I did create a lot during the time of pandemic, and it did inspire me to work more, because I was
fascinating.
sequestered to home.
Nicole?
Yeah, so it was obviously a very unique time for everybody. And I found myself as a designer really diving deep into the design world. And like everybody else, I was basically quarantined as well in the height of it. And I recognized that I was really diving in deep and kind of, in a way, using what I had. So I had my sewing machine. I had some jersey materials and other cottons left over. I started sewing masks and donating them. I started pulling out ribbons and making them straps for masks. And then I started finding like other really cool chains that I happen to have here, and other materials that I forgot I had. And I just started using them and designing with them, and saying, oh my God, I have this stuff here. This stuff is all here. And I think that sense of adaptability and just I think it's also from my ancestors, just being able to really like hunker down and use what you have, make the best of it, and get through it. And I did that, and there obviously a lot of people were affected differently. So this is speaking to how I was affected. I just kind of really dove way deep into me as a designer, because that was like the only role. Everyone was home. No one was really going out to work. So I was still a designer, the designer to use what I have at my fingertips. And that's just what I did. So
that's incredible. That you just reminded me. So the Anthony Quinn Foundation, we a big part of what we do, we promote the importance of having an arts education, or having arts in your life as you're growing up, because we feel it's almost like giving a child or a young person a toolbox with which to deal with life's challenges. The creativity is something that you can always use to help work through some of the challenges that life throws you. You never know what's going to come at you. Look at where we all are today with this. And when you have a creative background and you have that in your, something to go to express yourself through, and release, and be able to put on paper, on paint, like you, Jeannie, or in metal, or just transforming something into something else, I think is a tremendous gift and tool to have as a young person, and as you're, for so many of life's challenges. So I think you both, I don't know, I know you, Nicole, because you went to Rhode Island School of Design, but in your younger years, did you have arts education? And Jeanne, did you have arts education? Because I think it's really not, years ago, I think it was a given. You had some kind of painting or drawing or music in your life, but now it's kind of dismissed as unimportant or second rate. Math and science take precedence, and I think the arts is so critically important in a young person's development. So I just would love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
I agree. I remember taking classes as a young girl and it was a mixed media class. I believe it was at RISD, and just doing all of the above. And I remember taking some sewing lessons and piano lessons, and my piano instructor like definitely fell asleep during my my class, and I was definitely not good, but it was still something that I was trying to work at, and I did look forward to it, I think, even though I really was not good at it. But even to this day, I wonder, like, maybe I should pick it up again. I think it's these things, like you said, it's a toolbox. It's something that we make our own, and it's something that was personal to us. And I would absolutely like recommend children and young adults, just, it's never too late to just dive in and play around. You don't have to be good, but it's something, it's the exercise and act of doing it that's enriching.
Yeah. How about you, Jeannie? Did you have arts in your middle school, elementary school? Was that a big part of your?
Well, I think we had a little bit of it. I went to a Catholic school, so I think it was the 3 R's mostly. But when I was in junior high and high school, yeah, I was really involved with arts. And I mean, I started with pottery, and we had art, you know, basic 2-dimensional drawing and oil painting, and I really enjoyed it. That's when I found myself. But yeah, I think once you study any subject deep enough, it encompasses mathematics, science. I mean, it encompasses everything. It's just not art, and you're not learning anything but art. You're learning measurements and calculations and spatial relationships.
True.
It's not just art. I mean, if you study as an architect, I mean, my goodness, your mathematics skills have got to be right up there, and you're studying so many more different technologies. So yeah, we had it, and I had it. I remember starting as a fine arts major, but I went into commercial art, and then eventually I ended up graduating with a degree in education. But truthfully, art was always there for me, and I always felt like it was around me. I mean, you just take a walk outside and you're looking at the plants or your flowers and the colors and the relationship to the spaces. Yeah, art's very important. And I don't think
You're
it's
absolutely
secondary.
correct. And it's all integrated, isn't it?
Yes,
and I
yes.
think more and more we're finding mathematics integrated in music and
Oh, yeah.
nature and fractal. And there's just so many things that are interwoven. So it's just an important cog in the whole, in the greater picture of everything. Yeah. So it's just something that can't be left out. And I think I'm an Italian. My parents were Italian, my grandparents, and I know that with them, there was no distinction. The arts and the art, what you're saying, crafting, artisanship, it was just part of everyday life. So it wasn't even, you could be an artist and not even be recognized as an artist.
Right.
You built furniture, or you built, you just did handiwork, but you were very creative as a person. So I think, we're very fortunate to have that kind of ancestry, in our blood. And blood is important, isn't it? It just never, as we all learn from all these ancestry reports, it doesn't go away. It just stays with us and connects us all more and more into the future. Let me see if there are any other questions here. Sorry, I got wrapped up in that. What advice do you have for young artists? So I'll let you go first, Nicole. Do you have any advice? And Jeanne, after Nicole, can you please tell us a bit more about plein air? So I'll let Nicole do the young artist, and then Jeanne, you tell us about plein air and what does that style entail?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nicole, you first.
Yeah, as a young artist, I think someone once told me, say yes before you can think of a reason to say no. Dive into everything. if it's not maybe the category that moves you, just do it. Just work with somebody, volunteer to do something, learn something, just jump in and be a part of it all. And doing that has taught me so much, and especially about making this my business. You just, it's not the type of experience and the lessons you get in school. It's something else. It's just life lessons, and you just have to jump in. You don't get to learn those in school. And RISD was the most amazing school. But until I went to New York, I volunteered and jumped into every fashion show, working backstage, doing things, working with stylists, everything. I just did it. I just did it before I could think of a reason not to. And that's my best advice.
Great.
Okay, well, plein air is simply put, painting outdoors, painting outside. And plein air is a very important discipline in painting, I believe, because when you paint or when you draw or sketch outside and you're looking at an object or a landscape, what you're seeing is really the truth, because you're not seeing a two-dimensional photograph. You're seeing things in 3-dimension. And it's very important to be able to learn that, because now you're looking at the water, but now you're seeing the water actually move, and the flow and ebb of tides. You're seeing a tree, and if you see the sunlight on a tree, the shadows are there. That wouldn't be there in a photograph. So I think it's very important for an artist to learn to paint or draw, sketching and plein air, because you're seeing it for what it really is. And it doesn't have to be fabulous. You could be just what you're looking at, and you just paint what you see or draw what you see. I think it's an act that an artist really appreciates. I think that maybe you don't start in plein air. Maybe you learn to basic 2-dimensional design and drawing. You can sketch with charcoal. But plein air is very much like painting or drawing a portrait or live model, because there again, you've got the actual physical being or the landscape in front of you, and it's 3-dimensional. And now you're seeing how the light refracts and shines the shadows where they appear and where they don't. So yeah, plein air is wonderful. You can paint anytime in plein air. You can paint in the snow if you can bundle up, but it's a beautiful time to paint, as it is to paint on a gray day. But sunny days are beautiful. I prefer to paint in the late afternoon. It depends on what time frame we're at, but where the sun is just kind of getting lower to the ground, to the earth and disappearing, not necessarily a sunset, but before the sunset. And to paint the sunset is wonderful also, but you have to paint quickly because the light changes rapidly. But
yeah,
does that
to be
answer
an
the
artist,
question?
you have to have that skill of observation.
Yes,
And
that's
be
very
able
much
to
it.
look. But what I find also is fascinating, how I'm sure that if I sat you down outside in front of a scene and another artist next to you, your interpretations of what you're seeing could be very different, because it's so much in the eye of the beholder, right? So you're looking at a scene and you could see certain colors or pick certain things out of what you're seeing and interpret it differently on your canvas.
And the importance of objects are different in everybody's mind.
Right.
So yeah.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
I think we're out of time, but I thank you ladies for all of your, sharing your work with us tonight and sharing your work with your involvement with the National Organization of Italian American Women. Being Italian myself, I understand that that's not something you can ever forget because we're not allowed to. But for anybody watching tonight wants to know anything more about Nicole, Jeanne, the Anthony Quinn Foundation, we're going to put the links to the websites on the NOIAW's website. And on behalf of NOIAW and its Rhode Island region, I wish to thank you all for joining us tonight, and looking forward to future events. And I hope you all had a great time as we did. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.